My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough.
This is the Patriots Prayer Podcast. It's a tremendous show, one of the greatest shows in the history of the world.
This is Bryson Gray, and you are watching the Patriots Prayer.
PTN, you're doing the right thing.
On the Patriots Prayer Network. Thank you all.
PPN on your bumper.
I'm Tom McDonald. This is the Patriot Prayers Network. Check it out. Lots of good TV. Lots of cool people. Tune in. Keep it locked.
I'm the white boy with the middle fingers in the air, dog. We don't give a what. 100 white boys gonna hold me down anywhere, dog. We think that you suck. My Patriots, the craziest. They ain't afraid of breaking fists on faces. If you really wanna taste of this, no safety tip. The same mistake and spray the clip. I pray you miss, cause if you don't, they gon' go wacko. Automatic gun smoke like tobacco. Never hit a lady, but it's pretty hard to tell if you're a girl or a they, them. There's these, that, those. I ain't never gonna take a knee for the anthem. Smack them. I don't give a damn, can't stand them. Gang full of randoms. Fan with a handgun. Run up in your mansion, leave it all abandoned. I was raised to be brave till the grave. United States, we love the country that they've been corrupting. Go woke and go broker if you ain't obeyed. My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flags. American flags. American flags. And every time we pull up, all you...
Guys, I got to tell you, this is going to be one hell of a show. So before we get into like the bigger questions, we're going to talk about some patterns. All of this surrounding the Epstein email revelations, or what they want you to believe are revelations, right? So this is there's a lot of trickery and subterfuge that's going on here. We're going to break it all down for you. So the Epstein email release, because the way these emails were used, right? The way that they were used, it was like hidden, highlighted, and selectively amplified things in there that tell you everything about how narratives are, right? How they actually build their narratives. You just got to watch, and you have to be smart enough to be able to follow what they're doing, so you're not one of the people that are duped by it. You know, this is how they weaponize information. So let's walk through this, shall we? So the power play they tried to keep out of the story. This is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Larry Summers, a name that you're supposed to forget, even though you heard it probably your entire life. Summers isn't some side character. He isn't some kind of an extra walking through the background of American politics. He was the Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton, Director of National Economic Council under Barack Obama, and he was a top economic advisor to Joe Biden. President of Harvard during Epstein's rehabilitation period. Summers is one of the probably most embedded, influential establishment figures in the last 30 years in politics. So when his name shows up repeatedly in the Epstein inbox after 2008, after the 2008 conviction. So we're talking about a guy who not just he was dealing with Epstein, but he was dealing with Epstein after he knew he was a dirtbag, after he knew he was a pedophile. He was still dealing with him. And the media should have lit up like a Christmas tree, but instead they buried it. Because here's what the emails actually say. And this is what it should have been headline news, right? Summers was still communicating with Epstein after the conviction. Most public figures actually tried to distance themselves at this point from Epstein after 2008, but not Summers. His communication didn't slow down a lick, not a little bit. It continued. So I have an email here. Let's take a look at the email here. I want to make sure I pull up the right scene here. So here it goes. There is the first email drop. This is what they gave you in highly redacted, right? So this email alone should have dominated the national coverage, but we're just getting started. Epstein confided in Summers about Trump. One of the most revealing things in the emails in this entire dump from Epstein, and if you read it right there, it says, I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump. Not one decent cell in his body, he goes on to say. Stop and think about that. Jeffrey Epstein, the trafficker, the manipulator, the man known for weaponizing perception, vented about Donald Trump to Larry Summers. All right, why Summers, though? Why Summers? Why would he vent to Summers? Because Summers was a connected insider, a powerful advisor, a man with influence where it counts. Where it counts. And he tried to exert that influence every single way that he could. Let's take a quick look at an interview with Larry Summers real quick.
I did.
Okay.
Oh, actually, this is the Ghislaine
Larry
Maxwell
Summers,
deal.
the former secretary of the
But
Treasury.
what I want you to hear,
I did.
I want you to listen to
Yes.
this. I'm going to rewind this, because this is where she's actually going to tell you a bit about Summers and how connected he was, how close he was with Jeffrey Epstein. So pay close attention to what she says. Keep in mind, these are the people trying to push you and redirect your anger through a bunch of redacted, cryptic emails at Trump. And you need to understand who's doing this, what they're telling you, and most importantly of all, what they're not telling you. Take a listen.
I did.
Okay. Larry Summers, the former secretary of the Treasury. Do you know that person?
I did. Yes.
How?
I met Mr. Summers through Mr. Epstein.
And the same question, just generally time period. Are you talking about early 2000s, 90s, after that?
I honestly really don't know.
Okay.
I did want to say something. I forgot that there was yesterday. You asked me about Mr. Epstein's properties. He had a rental in Boston as well, but not for very long. But it was another place that I had to put together, and I only went with him once, and he would go there independently of me. No, I would not go with him.
Was that in the 90s?
I think it was, yes.
Mr. Summers, do you know what his relationship was with Mr. Epstein, business, personal, both, or don't you know?
I think he spoke to Mr. Epstein about business a lot, but I think they were friends.
So there it is. There it is. And so she says she doesn't know whether or not it was business, personal, or what it was. She knows very, very well what it was. Right. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. And now ask yourself, where did the framing start? Who was feeding it? And why does it mirror Epstein's private messaging so damn closely? Right? That's exactly what you should actually be asking yourself. No, why? Why so closely? Because let's talk about what they really didn't want to talk about. Summers defended Epstein's involvement with Harvard. Rather than actually distancing himself, Summers rationalized Epstein's donations, even while Epstein was rebranding himself as a science philanthropist. Summers appeared to be repeatedly on Epstein's calendar. This wasn't just one email. It wasn't just one meeting. That's what you need to understand. This is an ongoing pattern. This was a pattern. There was sustained contact. And then comes the confirmation that nobody wanted to talk about. The Ghislaine Maxwell, under oath, admitted that she personally introduced Summers to Epstein, right? Which was a clip that you just heard. So right there is a perfect storm. A trafficker, an elite fixer, a powerful political insider, all connected directly to one another. If this had been any other prominent conservative figure, the media would have launched a month-long special. But with Summers, it was complete silence, crickets. So they needed a distraction, and they found one. With all of that damning material on Summers, what did the media choose to amplify? Not the emails, not the calendar entries, not Maxwell, not the Harvard connection. No, they grabbed one email one vague, strategically redacted email. And I want you to realize that that dog that hasn't barked is Trump in the email that was redacted. They spent hours at my house with him. Let's see if I can pull that particular one up here. I know it's hard to see, but that's exactly what you're seeing at the top right there. That's what you're seeing, right? That quote that I just gave you. And so here they go. They're trying to paint this picture. And so they redact this email, and suddenly the narrative became that Trump was with a hidden victim. Trump linked to mystery girl. Why is her name concealed? Why was the name concealed? Fair question, right? They just needed the implication, because the implication infects faster than evidence. They need you just to have the perception of reality, not actual reality. So if they can make you ask the question, if they can get in your head, which is very easy to do with a lot of people on the left, because they want to hate this guy so bad. All you need to be able to do is give them an excuse. But the actual truth comes out. The unredacted version released the same day under that redaction, the name that everyone knows is there is Virginia Giuffre. That is the thing that they fought so hard to keep out of the press. That's what they wanted you not to see. That's what they didn't want you to know. They didn't want you to see the unredacted version. And why is that so important? Why is that so important to try to hide a name and then put out these cryptic emails? Well, it may have something to do with the fact that Virginia has testified repeatedly that Trump never touched her. Trump never flirted with her. Trump never went to Epstein Island. Trump banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. So why redact her name? To protect her? It's laughable. No, absolutely not. It is to protect the narrative, because if the public saw her name, the whole manufactured scandal collapses on the spot. It was a setup in one sentence. They hid the name not to shield a victim, but to create an illusion of a victim, so the public would assume guilt where none existed at all. And while the world stared at the black bar, the real story, the Summers story, quietly slid off of the front page. So that's how the narrative engineering actually works. That's how setups happen. And that's how truth gets buried. If you'd like, I can explain how this all works together in a full way. We're going to dive into the entire narrative. We're going to start off here in section 2 with Michael Wolff and the narrative. Michael Wolff being the dirtbag of a reporter that Michael Wolff, he's a narrative laundering machine. So now that we understand how the redacted email shifted attention away from Summers, now we can move on to the next part of the picture, the role of Michael Wolff and how certain media ecosystems actually amplified the Epstein's private statements into the public storyline. Because when you look at the emails closely, a very specific pattern emerges. Epstein-Wolff media distribution. Epstein-Wolff media distribution. And the pattern becomes clearer once you see the context. Who Michael Wolff is. Michael Wolff is a well-known journalist and author. Most people recognize him from books like Fire and Fury, Siege, Landslide. But these were major bestsellers. And they shaped the public's conversations during 2010 and beyond. Wolff's reporting style has always been controversial. Some praise him for access and insight. Others criticize him for his verification of issues. But either way, his work gets attention. So when Epstein emailed Wolf directly, that matters. That matters quite a bit. Not because it proves anyone's guilt or innocence, but because it shows who Epstein was speaking to and how certain narratives were developed before they even reached the public. The 2019 email from Epstein to Wolf, in the document released publicly, one email stands out. The Epstein Wolf 2019 email. And of course, he, meaning Trump, knew about the girls. That's what they say in the email. Now, this is Epstein speaking, says, not an investigator, not a witness, not a verified source. It was Epstein speaking. And it's one person making a claim in a private communication. So what happened next? What happens next is what makes the whole email story like relevant in a much larger story. What Wolf did not do. See, according to the documents available, Wolf did not forward the email to investigators. That matters. Wolf did not publicly disclaim the message. He did not issue a warning to authorities. Instead, the public record shows that Wolf continued to engage with Epstein privately. And that engagement matters because what happened right after? The media amplification of how the email entered into the public narrative. Shortly after the 2019 communication, Wolf began appearing across multiple media outlets. And some of these appearances centered heavily on unverified claims about Epstein's beliefs regarding various public figures. Here's one example. Listen to this broadcast and in this moment, this private email where the tone began showing up in the mainstream reporting. So let's take a look at this. This is an email. I mean, this is a scene where Wolf is being interviewed, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to push the narrative, the big bad scary Trump. Let's listen.
Say these emails were turned over by Jeffrey.
Here it is. Sorry, wrong clip.
Epstein. So never forget.
Okay, let's go back to Epstein and the emails that came out from the Oversight Committee also last Friday. So Trump was over here trying to do this with Zelensky. Meanwhile, the Oversight Committee were distributing emails.
I'm not sure where they come from. I think this must have been a leak from somewhere. I mean, and you can't tell who's leaking.
A leak from somewhere.
The Democrats are leaking, the Republicans are leaking.
So what is inside Trump's head when the... So there's Trump. He's got Putin, he's got Zelensky on the line, he's shouting at Zelensky, and all the time there is the drumbeat of the Oversight Committee and the Epstein files.
All of this is better. Everything else that is going on, good or bad, shut down Ukraine, Zelensky, the peacemaking, peace collapsing, all of this is better for Trump than Epstein.
Okay, so we haven't even discussed where we're going today.
Yeah, but because I'm not saying that anymore.
Okay, you're not saying that we're going inside Trump's head.
But I will say again that we do go inside Trump's head.
We're not saying we're going inside Trump's head, but we do say we're going inside of Trump's head. Oh, God, this is so... These people are morons. So you listen to the broadcast, and you heard exactly what I heard, a whole lot of nothing. And the fact that he's sitting there and these fake journalists are asking him questions, but they don't ask him the most relevant questions. Why were you communicating with this guy and not telling anybody about it? You knew who he was and what he was doing, and you were secretly talking to CNN, who were handing you questions behind the scenes while you were doing this. But none of the FBI wasn't aware. These are the things that you need to understand. How these people work, and this is what they do. The Mockingbird media. Take a listen.
state and are part of a trove of some 23,000 documents. A group of House members is now pushing a measure to release all of the Epstein files, but just these few emails are renewing questions about the relationship between Epstein and President Trump.
The emails released by House Democrats Wednesday appear to come from Jeffrey Epstein's personal Gmail account, writing about President Trump. In an April 2011 message that appears to be sent to his convicted co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein wrote, quote, "I want you to realize that that dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Victim spent hours at my house with him." The victim's name was redacted. In another message, apparently sent to journalist Michael Wolff in January 2019, Epstein wrote about Trump, quote, "Of course he knew about the girls," as he asked Ghislaine to stop. The emails have not been independently verified by CBS News, but Epstein is alleging Trump knew about his conduct. In July 2019, Trump denied any knowledge of Epstein's sex trafficking operation, and he said he'd had a falling out with his one-time friend.
I did have a falling out a long time ago. The reason doesn't make any difference, frankly, but I haven't spoken to him in probably 15 years or more. I wasn't a big fan of Jeffrey Epstein, that I can tell you.
Trump has called the so-called Epstein files a hoax, but many of his own supporters have pushed for their release. A group of House lawmakers believes it will soon have the votes to release them, with a new Democratic member sworn in today. Ghislaine Maxwell is now serving a 20-year prison sentence for her role in the sex trafficking ring. House Democrats.
I love how they try to frame this like the Republicans are the one trying to keep these files from coming out. Nothing could be further from the truth, right? It's not a right or left issue, right? We're talking about pedophiles. We're talking about people who have victimized young women, right? And there are plenty of people to catch blame on both sides of the aisle. Let's just call it straight down the middle like it is. But they don't want to go there. They want to play the blame game. They want to play left, right, red, blue, liberal, conservative. They want to keep us divided into two squares, because if you're in this square, you can't be in that square. You're either with us or against us, and you have to take a team, pick a team. And what about the third square, the truth square? You know, that's the one where many of us firmly stand. And in that clip, you see the Epstein's private words became a headline, a single story, a talking point, a segment on broadcast news without the context of the broader email set and without the counter testimony from Virginia Giuffre. How is a private, unverified email message becoming part of public perception? Not through evidence, but through amplification. Wolff's on-air framing. Shortly afterward, Wolff actually appeared again discussing these leaks, disturbing. They said these leaks were disturbing and damaging. So here, that's just another example of Wolff speaking publicly about the impact of the leaked messages, ones where he was actually in on the cover-up. He was the guy that was actually doing the communicating with Epstein, but he's talking about it in some like it's not him, like he wasn't the one in the email. And here's the thing, in the appearance that you just seen, where he's talking about that thing where he's trying to get into Trump's head, you heard that. Wolff referencing the materials linked to Epstein, Wolff implying insider knowledge, Wolff giving the message additional weight by simply discussing them. And again, this does not prove a damn thing about the context of the emails. What it shows is the process: private message, media interpreter, public narratives. This is how stories transform from internal documents into public understanding. The key point is this is narrative laundering. Laundering in a narrative sense. It does not imply criminal intent. It refers to a pathway where a raw statement from an interested party with no verification passes through a media figure source and then emerges as a widely accepted talking point. Wolff's public comments combined with the broadcast coverage gave Epstein's private remarks a reach far beyond what the emails alone would have produced. And it's the amplification of the structure that actually matters, just like the redacted email that created the ambiguity of Wolff's emails that created the shape of what we're looking at, the frame through which the public was encouraged to interpret the broader dump. And this is where the patterns start to emerge. We now have Summers receiving private anti-Trump messaging from Epstein, Wolf receiving private anti-Trump messaging from Epstein, media outlets receiving the amplified version of that messaging, all happening outside of the official investigative channels without verifying any of their claims and without acknowledging the counter evidence in the same documents set, including Virginia Giuffre's testimony that already has cleared Trump of any wrongdoing. And once that framework is in place, you begin to see how the broader themes that take shape, because narrative patterns don't happen in a vacuum. They form through repetition, framing, and selectively emphasizing. If you'd like, I could actually, let me see. It's the delivery, if I can just put it plainly. It is the delivery of that information and who delivers it and who's delivering it. The Mockingbird media. And now that we've looked at how Epstein's communicated privately with people like Summers and how those private thoughts later surfaced in public coverage through figures like Michael Wolff, we can step back and look at the bigger pattern, because once you map the flow of information from private email to intermediary to media to public, you start to see how certain claims grow legs, while other details fall away completely. Brainwashing. So let's break down how that happens. It starts with a single piece of information, a major narrative that begins with a seed. Sometimes the seed is big, a direct quote, a confession, a document. Other times it's small, a vague line, a single sentence, or even a redaction. In this case, the seeds were Epstein's emails venting to Summers, Epstein's emails to Wolff, the redacted email referencing Trump, the selective focus on the one redaction, and none of these are conclusions. None are proof of anything on their own. They are seeds, fragments of information floating in the middle of thousands of pages, but the seeds don't grow without soil, and the soil is always selective attention. The media decides what gets amplified. And once the documents become public, every outlet, large or small, makes choices. What do we headline? What do we put on the front page? What do we ignore? What do we frame as important? What context do we leave out because it doesn't fit our angle? In this case, 3 simultaneous choices happened all at once. The emphasis was placed on the redacted Trump email. Silence fell over the Summers-Epstein exchanges. The interpretation of the Wolff messages were folded directly into the coverage. And this isn't unusual. Media outlets highlight the pieces that they believe will draw attention and spark more conversation. But what it actually means is that the public understanding gets shaped not by the full picture, but by parts of the chosen distribution. Once amplified, those selections, details, they gain momentum. They gain a little speed. Missing context creates its own story. It's what I don't tell you. And I have you fill in those blanks by drawing a line straight from where I am to what I want you to think. Narratives don't always form from what's actually there. Often they form by what's left out. For example, the email naming Giuffre was widely circulated with the name removed. Now, we fully believe that was Giuffre who was the reference in that email, and they know it, which is why they left it out. Giuffre's sworn statements clearing Trump were not placed alongside of any of those headlines. The Summers emails was not included in the initial framing of the major networks. Maxwell's disposition linking Summers to Epstein surfaced quietly without a placement in top story segments. When pieces are removed or they're underrepresented, the public fills in the gap. They fill in the gap with whatever seems logical, cinematic, or emotionally charged. A redacted name automatically feels suspicious. A brief, vague phrase automatically feels ominous. A missing detail automatically feels concealed. And this is what ambiguity becomes, a narrative engine. Commentary reinforces that angle. It's the way they present the news. And after the early coverage, commentators take over, often without having read the full document sets for themselves. They respond not to primary sources, but to curated portions already circulating. This creates a feedback loop. A small detail is amplified. Pundits respond to that detail. Their response generates new headlines. The headlines reinforce the importance of the original detail. The cycle then repeats. Soon, one of the details becomes the story, even if it was a tiny fraction of the actual evidence. This is how narrow claims can appear to be widespread. Not because everyone reviewed the documents, because everyone is responding to the same talking point. The narrative locks into place. Once the narrative has repetition, commentary, coverage, and social media momentum, a locked frame is created. A locked frame is when the public, the journalists, and even lawmakers start discussing the subject within the boundaries of the amplified detail, even if the detail was incomplete to begin with, or misrepresented, or even lacking context. For example, if the amplified detail is the redacted name, the frame becomes, who was the person? Who was the name removed? What does this imply? Even if the unredacted document is publicly available, the redacted version becomes the dominant reference point because it simply looks more ominous. The narratives solidify quickly, very quickly. Corrections travel slowly. And I don't see mainstream media ever really doing retractions. Do you see them apologizing except for if they have a lawsuit? That's the only time I've ever seen it happen. You know, Trump sues MSNBC or NBC or anyone else, and then all of a sudden the apologies happen, like what happened with The View. But once the media ecosystems have built momentum around a single angle, any counter evidence, even if it's strong, enters late and faces challenges. It's seen as a correction rather than the foundation itself. It's harder to create an emotional impact with clarification. Audiences remember the initial impression more vividly. It's how the human mind works for some reasons. We like to remember all the dirty little details. Media outlets may not revisit the story with equal intensity. Like they're not going to put the same energy into clearing your name as they did when they were dragging you through the mud. For example, Giuffre's testimony clearing Trump is documented. The Summers emails are on record. Maxwell's statements exist. The actual context surrounding the emails is publicly accessible. But these pieces did not receive the same level of amplification. They just didn't. Not as the earlier redacted narratives. And that imbalance shapes the understanding. And what we see in what we're going to see here in section 3 about what I'm getting ready to go over with you is showing you how narratives form about the assigning political intent or motive. Remember, this is what the left loves to do. This is what we call thought crimes. When you map the process, private messages emerging, selective details get amplified, commentary reinforcing the angle, context is lost, the public adopts the more condensed version of the story, alternate details fade into the background, you can see the architecture, not just the story, but of almost every single major story that hits national attention. The key here is not the conclusion, but the structure itself of how information becomes perception. What happens after the narrative locks in, after the aftershock effect takes place? Now we've seen how a single redacted name became the focal point and how emails meant to raise questions about Summers got redirected toward Trump, and how Wolf's commentary helped circulate Epstein's private opinions into public conversation. They think we're too stupid to figure this stuff out. And the crazy thing is, there are a lot of people right now that are still fooled into believing this nonsense. We can now look at what happens after the narrative locks in, because once that storyline takes hold, even if it's incomplete, misdirected, or missing key context, it begins to create aftershocks. These aftershocks spread outward into institutions, news cycles, commentary, and public consciousness. People start repeating this stuff that they have no idea about as if it's proven fact. Institutions adapt to the dominant angle. Once the narrative gains momentum, large institutions, media outlets, political organizations, advocacy groups, they all begin to adjust their messaging around what the public already believes. This doesn't mean they endorse the narrative. It means they react to what already has traction. For example, if the public's conversation is focused on the redacted Trump email, outlets begin hosting discussions about that angle, not the larger document set. In the early coverage, it emphasizes the ambiguity. The follow-up coverage continues with that same tone, even when more information becomes available. This creates an echo where the first impressions become the foundation for all future analysis, even if fewer facts contradict the original framing. Institutions rarely reverse course with the same intensity that they use to break a story. Once the lens is set, the coverage stays inside of that frame. Once the public is discussing that particular aspect of the story, especially a dramatic one, commentary naturally shifts towards whatever is getting most engagement. And that's what we often see. Op-ed columns, podcast debates, social clips, reaction videos, panel discussions, all built around the most emotionally charged portion of a story. And in this case, it's going to be the redacted name becomes the emotional center of this story. The ambiguity created speculation, and the implication became more memorable than the context. As commentators respond to the audience's own interest, and it becomes digestible, often at the expense of the nuance itself. This is how a long set of emails becomes reduced to a few repeated talking points. And once that simplification begins, it becomes difficult to reinforce the fuller context without resistance. Counter narratives struggle to catch up, even when additional information surfaces, such as Giuffre's clearing Trump. She cleared him, guys. Which is why I believe the left wanted to redact the name, because if you knew that was her name that was redacted, then you would know that the email isn't worth the paper it's printed on. The unredacted version showing her name, the Summers emails, the Maxwell confirmation of Summers' connection, these updates and these particular talking points face hurdles. They're less dramatic, less mysterious, less viral, less emotionally charged. The correction is never as compelling as the initial impression. So even though the documents are available, even though the facts exist in writing, the counter narratives become an uphill climb, not because people reject the facts, but because the earlier narrative arrived first and arrived with impact. So this is the stickiness. This is the stickiness effect. The effect in the media analysis. The first version of a story sticks more strongly, way more strongly in the memory than the later clarifications do. Public opinions begin to form around the most accessible version of the story. And when the public opinion begins to crystallize, it often does not, it does so around rather the most discussed detail. The most not the most important detail, that's for sure. It's the most discussed detail, and not the most factual one either. It's the one that you feel more emotionally attached to. This is because people can only respond to the stories that they are shown, and the story that receives the highest visibility becomes the default interpretation. For example, the first headlines, the first clips, the first tweets, the first panel discussions all shape the landscape in which the information must later enter. If the initial coverage is tightly focused on the redacted Trump email, then new information about Summers, Harvard, or the broader email context must compete and weigh all of the established narrative against it. Once the process begins changing, the public perception becomes less about the facts and more about visibility. If the facts get less visibility, they get less traction. And these guys love to hate to have Trump derangement syndrome. They don't want to hear the truth. They want to hear the truth that makes Trump look terrible, and they're not going to look any further. Once they hear it, that's what they're sticking with. It's not accuracy of the information that determines the impact. It's the timing and it's the reach of its release. Selective memory then sets in. As time passes, the narrative becomes simplified again, but now in memory, wasn't there something in the Epstein emails about Trump? This is what people think. Wasn't there a redacted victim? This is what they'll remember. Didn't some journalists say Epstein mentioned him? People recall fragments, not documents. They recall impressions and not specifics. This isn't because people are inattentive. It's because their brain stores the emotional outline of a story and not the raw data. An emotional outline of the story for many became a black bar hiding a name, a mysterious line about Trump, a broadcast segment repeating the claim, and a broadcast conversation reinforcing the same exact angle. The Summers context got most of the consequential part, and it becomes the background noise only later. Not because it lacks importance, but because it lacked early sustained amplification. That simple. That simple. Guys, I want to take a break for our sponsors, and we will be right back.
Heard of Q Broadcast? It's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q Broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Stars. And the best part, there are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
Guys, like you said, Most people, if you're an NFL fan, if you're, into the HBO, Cinemax, Stars, AMC shows, your TV bill is between $200 and $300 per month. It's nuts. You don't have access to everything that you want to see at your fingertips. You have a Netflix subscription, a Hulu subscription, a YouTube TV, Direct TV. And God knows how much money we're paying on entertainment each month. Q Broadcast is the way to go. $69.99. You get all of your video on demand, all the same streaming shows you're getting on Netflix and Hulu and everywhere else. All the up-to-date programming you get. The only free speech network around in the world, period. There is not another one. $69.99. $69.99. I put the QR code up there in the corner. I'm telling you, the easiest place you want to save $150 a month on your television bill. Very easy to do. You get Q and you cancel all the rest of your subscriptions because you don't need them anymore. You don't need them anymore. You're getting all of the sports, all the movies, all your series, all in one subscription for $69.99. You cannot beat that with a bat. I promise you, is the easiest way for you to save money right now. And we all know we need a little savings. There is so much going on with the cost of living today. This is an easy place for you to be able to cut the purse strings and be able to keep a little extra money, especially now with Christmas coming up. Yeah, we all need to save a little extra money. So back into this. And we're going to talk about by the time like the fuller context emerges, the frame is already built. And that's what they did with these emails. When the unredacted document appears, when additional emails surface, the testimonies are reread. When dates and details are clarified and the initial frame remains the dominant one, the public conversation, that's kind of where it stays. And that's not unusual. It's how major stories evolve into the modern information cycle, if you will. Once that frame is built, future events are interpreted through that frame rather than reshaping it. In other words, early storylines act as the blueprint. Later information becomes a footnote. It's not about wrong versus right. It's about understanding how the media environment functions once a narrative has settled into place. So how do institutions respond once a narrative settles? How additional releases or contradictions are handled? How information becomes a long-term record or even without full context, and how the narrative landscape sets the stage for what comes next. And now that we've walked through how narratives take shape and gain momentum and settle into the public memory, we reach the next phase of what happens when a narrative becomes the record. Because once the public has absorbed the storyline, even an incomplete or oversimplified version, institutions begin to operate around that storyline as if it's fixed, and not necessarily because they believe it, but because narratives are influence. This is what we saw when James O'Keefe did that undercover story with the CNN producer who told them they knew that the whole Russia thing was a hoax, but it was good ratings. It was good ratings. So they knew that they were lying. They didn't give a damn though, because their ratings were good. They admitted it on camera. They admitted it. Public expectations, organizational priorities, all of these things are what actually matters. And how future information is interpreted, let's break down what it looks like behind the scenes. When a storyline becomes the dominant one, and organizations tend to respond to that strategically. That doesn't mean that they agree. It means that they react to the existing environment. For example, the media outlets schedule follow-up segments. And when they schedule those follow-up segments, it's around whatever the audience is already discussing most. Public figures respond to the angles already circulating because those are the questions that are already being asked. And analysis focus on the detail that has the most visibility, even if other information exists. This creates the impression that the earlier storyline is official. One simply because it's the most widely acknowledged part of the story. Institutions aren't setting the narrative, they're adapting to the ones that are already in motion. Once the public is anchored to a specific angle, any additional documents, context, or contradictory details get classified as secondary. For example, the emails involving Summers, Maxwell's dispositions linking Summers to Epstein, once again, the unredacted version of the Trump email naming Giuffre's sworn statements, all things that kind of get lost in the mix. All of these may be archived, cited, or even referenced, but because they weren't part of the earliest wave of the coverage, they're treated as context, not as the core story. This sets up the hierarchy. Primary story, the first or most viral angle, the secondary information, everything else, supplemental details, precise facts added later. Even when the supplementary details are more significant, the primary story remains in the forefront. Once a narrative is established, future reporting tends to begin at the same place. For example, if the original headlines focused on the redacted email, the follow-up pieces, even months later, may still be referenced in that moment as the central pivot. This is how storylines become fixed points. They appear in recaps, they appear in summaries, they appear in historical timelines, they appear in the background sections of new articles. The initial framing becomes the shorthand for the entire episode. This means that later revelations, even factual ones, often do not replace the earlier narrative, but simply get added to it without altering its foundation. When institutions issue statements, whether it's from officials, agencies, or even a spokesperson, that statement tends to address the version of the story that is most widely understood. So any of the corrections or clarifications, they usually enter the story later and quietly. Once the dominant narrative is established, clarifying information tends to appear in smaller articles, 10 pages in, lower profile interviews, side columns, technical corrections, or even footnotes, because the general audience already feels like they understood the story and the clarifications don't receive the same intensity or attention. So, I mean, this is the game that the media plays. This is the game that the media plays. And they know what they're doing, because the guy that actually did it is sitting there talking about the guy mentioned in the emails when he was the guy emailing. I mean, you talk about projection and misdirection. So once a narrative becomes settled, once it becomes the baseline, that institution, media outlets, or audiences use their reference points, it doesn't simply just fade away. It becomes it begins to act like the lens through which they see everything else. And every detail, every new comment, every new release of the information now gets filtered through that lens, whether it fits or not. This isn't about anyone's intention. It's about how information works once a story reaches that locked stage. New information just simply gets interpreted through an old frame. That simple. So the public discussion tends to revolve around whether or not the audience already feels familiar with that the original story. Like, for instance, in this one, we're talking about the redacted name, the ambiguous phrasing, the most replayed clip, the circulating headline, and that becomes the center of the debate. Even if the full story contains more significant information, meanwhile, the Summers emails, the Maxwell disposition, the broader context may become deep cuts. Information that exists is available and is documented, but does not guide the direction of the debate because it didn't enter the public imagination with the same force. And this is what happens. This was the problem with the Smith-Mundt Act and what Obama did when he got rid of it, when he modified the Fairness Doctrine and he allowed the news agencies to become entertainment. And now these guys don't get their feet held to the fire. They put stuff out there like it's facts, even though it's not. And Obama said it himself. All you need to do is flood the news waves with enough garbage that no one knows what to believe. And that is where we're at currently, because I constantly see memes on Facebook and on X and other places, and the memes are very generalized, and 99% of them are absolute bullshit. But the people run with this one little meme like it tells the whole story, and like, because that meme exists, it must be true because it's a meme on the internet. Why not? Why wouldn't it be true? These are the numbskulls that we're dealing with 99% of the time, and 99% of them, they're on the left. You would not believe the discussions that I've had surrounding some of these issues when it comes to immigration, when it comes to USC 8 Code 1325, and the very simple explanation of why we need to deport people, and how they turn this into some story about liberal compassion, about separating families. It's because of the way these people irresponsibly deliver you the news. By now, we've walked through the entire path of how these narrative takes happen, how a single detail becomes the focal point, how the media attention amplifies one angle over another, how commentary reinforces earlier framework, and how the public forms memory around the most visible parts, and how that fixed narrative becomes the baseline for everything that comes afterwards. So when future releases or controversies emerge, whether they involve documents, statements, emails, investigations, or testimony, they don't enter neutral territory. They enter the public environment that already has a reference point, an established structure, or for evaluating all these documents and leaks, because they are going to weigh it against what they think they know, not what's actually true. Expectations about transparency get thrown out the window. Awareness of how selective emphasis can shape perception is apparent, but not to the guy who already has an angle on what he thinks is true. This means future stories are going to be judged not only on not on facts, but they're going to have to align with or diverge from the earlier pattern, the BS that they put out first, that they wanted to get all of the attention. Again, not persuasion, just the structure that they want to base their reality on. So media outlets respond with pre-built framing tools. News organizations also operate in the context of prior narratives. Once a high-profile event has been demonstrated how selective coverage can influence public understanding, media outlets tend to apply the similar framing tools intentionally or not. Public expectations evolve with each new disclosure. For those of us who actually want to go into the facts and actually know, those of us who aren't brainwashed into this two-box red, blue, white, black, left, right, liberal, conservative nonsense. When the truth becomes what you seek, the truth becomes what has to mean more than anything else, then we can straighten these things out. But as long as people are drug along like little ponies by a damn leash by the media who is lying to them through their teeth, not just by what they say, by what they don't say. Until that changes, nothing else is going to change. I don't understand why Trump didn't change the Smith-Mundt Act with an executive order and put the fairness doctrine back in place. That's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen. We need truth. We need to be able to hold the media accountable when they lie. When they do these types of, when they do this type of reporting, it's misleading. I don't know how many people out there right now believe that as a result of that email, they have some smoking gun where they caught Trump in the Epstein BS and now they got him. but you actually don't. What you have is a nothing burger. This episode was never just about the emails itself. It was never just about Summers or Wolf redactions or media segments or commentary. It was about how information behaves once it enters into the public arena. Across every part of this, this is what I'm trying to get through to you so that you don't fall for the BS, that you understand exactly how they pull these tricks that they pull. And I hope my audience is smart enough not to fall for this nonsense. You know, I've heard people drag Tucker's name through the mud. I've heard Candace's name dragged through the mud. And I've never been the biggest fan of Nick Fuentes, but when he's right, he's right. Plain and simple. Now, we just heard the other day Laura Loomer come back from Israel and say, you know what? The United States doesn't need and shouldn't need to send Israel no more money. And then right after that, Bibi Netanyahu comes along and says the same thing. Why? Why? Why is what you should be asking. Why? Because they are trying to win back the narrative. They're trying to shape what you think and how you feel by what they say and what they don't say. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. I stand with Tucker. I've heard his name be dragged through the mud. I've heard him misquoted. I've heard people put intentions behind phrases that he said. The same goes with Candace Owens. Yeah, I mean, talking about her dreams and all that kind of stuff. I get if you disagree with it, but why are you focusing on that instead of every other question that she asked that had serious validity? Why? For the same reasons of everything that I just took you through. For the same reasons. So guys, listen. I have entered a space where I am going to be coming into a podcasting theme full-time. Full-time. So you're going to get to see my ugly mug quite a bit, even though I took the longest break in the history of podcasting. And I had to get some things straight and did all that. And 9 to 5 and all of that aside, it's not there anymore. This is my full-time gig. And it's either make it or break it time. And I'm going to tell you this, that everything that I say, every story that I give you, all the time that I put into these things is for one thing and one thing only. And that is to chase and tell and give you and amplify the truth. The truth. That's what matters to me. That's what should matter to you, is the truth. I have been through all phases of this thing where I've been the evangelical Zionists. I grew out of that. I had to humble myself. People like Ian Carroll and Ryan Matta. And I was humble enough to say, man, I used to hate you guys. I could not stand the anti-Israeli rhetoric because I didn't understand. I didn't know. I didn't understand. So now that I understand a lot of the details behind why these things were being said, why people felt the way that they felt about these issues, we are going to be diving into them wholeheartedly, and we're not going to be mincing words at all. Zero. So tomorrow I'm going to be doing a podcast, and that podcast is going to center around TPUSA's pastor. Remember, he called himself America's pastor. Mr. McCoy, we have some things about you that we think the world should know beyond any shadow of a doubt, and why in the hell you were put in the position that you were put in, and these things were made, were hidden, were covered up, and even at one point defended, is beyond me. But if I have anything to do with it, they are all going to know who you are and what you did. This man has done some of the most despicable thing that a grown man can ever do. Ever do. And we're going to go into that in detail. So look forward to that on the next episode. And guys, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Patriots Prayer Podcast. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. And guys, as usual, is what I usually say. The silent majority, you need to stop being silent and stand your ground. Evil will never retreat willingly. It must, in every single case, be beaten back. Have a great one. We'll see you soon. Have a good night.
My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough.
This is the Patriots Prayer Podcast. It's a tremendous show, one of the greatest shows in the history of the world.
This is Bryson Gray, and you are watching the Patriots Prayer.
PTN, you're doing the right thing.
On the Patriots Prayer Network. Thank you all.
PPN on your bumper.
I'm Tom McDonald. This is the Patriot Prayers Network. Check it out. Lots of good TV. Lots of cool people. Tune in. Keep it locked.
Know where I stand. I'm the white boy with the middle fingers in the air, dog. We don't give a what. 100 white boys gonna hold me down anywhere, dog. We think that you suck. My Patriots the craziest. They ain't afraid of breaking fists on faces. If you really wanna taste of this, no safety tip. The same mistake and spray the clip. I pray you miss, cause if you don't, they gon' go wacko. Automatic gun smoke like tobacco. Never hit a lady, but it's pretty hard to tell if you're a girl or a they, them. There's these, that, those. I ain't never gonna take a knee for the anthem. Smack them. I don't give a damn, can't stand them. Gang full of randoms. Fan with a handgun. Run up in your mansion, leave it all abandoned. I was raised to be brave to the grave. United States, we love the country that they've been corrupting. Go woke and go broker if you ain't awake. My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flag.